Hello and welcome to the Storm of Scripture. Today, in our walk through the book of Revelation, we reach the final demise of the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth, also known as a false prophet. These two first appeared in Revelation chapter 13, and now they are ready for a major military confrontation with Jesus and his army. But when Jesus appears, the battle is over before it even begins. Thank you for joining me as we examine the treasures in Revelation chapter 19, verses 17 through 21. Revelation 19, verses 17 and 18. And I saw one angel standing in the sun, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly directly overhead, "Come, assemble for the great banquet of God, in order that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of military tribunes, and the flesh of the powerful, and the flesh of horses, and those seated on them, and the flesh of all people, both free and slave, and small and great." I considered calling this lesson "What's Up with the Birds?" because it seems somewhat out of the blue and odd to be talking to birds and inviting them to a banquet. There's a lot setting up this scene with this angel standing in the sun. The Greek word that's translated as "in" could also mean "on," and some translations of this verse render it as an angel standing on the sun. If we were to try to parse this as literally and say that the angel was either on or in the sun, literally, then he would be millions of miles away from the earth. And I don't care how loud he's crying out, his voice is not going to carry through the void of space all the way to earth. So whatever this is describing, it is not a literalistic picture of an angel on the center of the solar system. It could mean that the sun is directly behind the angel, and you can't look at the angel directly because he's in the sun, because the sun is right behind him. I think that's probably, if we're going to go with any sort of literalism with relation to the sun, that would be what we're trying to picture. This isn't the first angel that we have in a kind of similar situation with a message that he cries out with a loud voice. Chapter 18 begins with a similar angelic announcement. I'm going to read the first couple of verses of chapter 18 for the comparison. "After these things, I saw another angel descending from heaven, who had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. And he cried out with a powerful voice, saying, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, and it has become a dwelling place of demons and a haunt of every unclean spirit, and a haunt of every unclean bird, and a haunt of every unclean and detested animal.'" There are several parallels between these two angelic announcements. In the first case, in chapter 18, the earth is illuminated by the angel. So instead of the angel being in the sun, the angel is providing light like the sun would by illuminating the earth. Some commentators see this angel in chapter 18 as a Christophany. In other words, this is an appearance of Jesus himself as an angel because he is the light of the world. From John chapter 1, the light is the life. And so if the earth is illuminated by the splendor of this angel, perhaps it is Jesus being the light of the earth. I'm not sure I'm going to go that far. And the one that's standing in the sun is certainly not a Christophany, because Christ has already appeared on the white horse. And presumably the white horse is still moving through the heavens while this angel makes his announcement from in the sun. There are several times in the book of Revelation where an angel is said to have extraordinary qualities that we associate with Jesus. like having the gospel for the earth, or having a rainbow as a crown, which is a divine image, or being in the clouds, coming on the clouds, which is a phrase associated with Jesus, of course. And yet, sometimes these are explicitly called angels. Sometimes it's called the Son of Man without specifically identifying Jesus by name. Beyond the superficial comparisons of this first angel from chapter 18 and the angel in chapter 19, both of them making a message by crying out with a loud or powerful voice, we have the parallel that these two angels are announcing the fall of the two aspects of wickedness that are to be judged and removed from the earth by Christ's return. The first one in chapter 18, removing the systemic evil of Babylon itself, the city and the empire and the whole imperial system being wiped out in chapter 18. And then the beast, both the beast and the false prophet, which was also called the beast from the earth, being wiped out here in chapter 19. It's a 1-2 punch, and each one of the punches being announced by an angel with a powerful or loud voice. The quirky thing about this second announcement is that it's not to people, but to birds. He's saying to the birds that fly directly overhead. There has been a literal bird mentioned flying overhead prior to this, and that is an eagle that announces the first of the three woes during the trumpets in Revelation 8. Revelation 8:13. And I looked, and I heard one eagle flying directly overhead, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who live on the earth from the remaining sounds of the trumpets of the three angels who are about to blow the trumpet." Not only do the eagles talk, but the eagles apparently listen and understand the voice of the angel when he's calling them to eat. When I was looking through this verse in Revelation 8:13 at the word for eagle, I learned that there is no different word for eagle and vulture in Greek. They're considered the same bird, which would make sense for the birds that are going to be eating the carrion in Revelation 19, because we wouldn't think of eagles as scavenger birds like that, hunting birds. When we think of vultures, when we think of the scavenger type, in the Greek of the New Testament, it's all the same bird. Very well could be associated with both Revelation 18:13 and 19. This location of flying directly overhead only happens one other time besides chapter 8 and chapter 19, and that's in Revelation 14, where it describes the angel. I thought I'd go ahead and throw this in for completeness as we consider what's flying directly overhead. In Revelation 14:6, it's one of three angels with a message flying over the 144,000 in Jerusalem on Mount Zion. And this is the one that says, "I saw another angel flying directly overhead, having an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who reside on the earth and to every nation and tribe and language and people." One reason I think that this angel is giving a message that can be heard, perceived by the 144,000, is that it uses this phrase, flying directly overhead, the same place where the bird was flying in chapter 8, and where the birds are flying in chapter 19, directly overhead. It seems to be not in the heavenly realm, that would be outside of the perception of people, but in the earthly heavens, in the sky, in other words, above, where we could just look up and see it. What the angel announces to the birds is for them to come, an invitation to come and assemble for the great banquet of God. The irony in inviting the birds to gather for the banquet of God is that the only banquet that we've read of before now is the banquet of the wedding celebration of the Lamb. So there seems to be this implied connection between the banquet of the wedding celebration of the Lamb that was announced in Revelation 19:9, when an angel talking to John says, "Right, blessed are those who are invited to the banquet of the wedding celebration of the Lamb." And he said to me, "These are the true words of God." And then the very next mention of a banquet is this angel inviting the birds to feast on the flesh of the dead soldiers and army leaders after the battle has been won. There is an interesting two-sided coin here where the celebration of Jesus' return and being united with his followers in what is characterized as the wedding of the bride and the groom is the same as the defeat of the wicked beast and his followers, which is characterized as a banquet for the birds to eat on the flesh of the defeated foe. Two sides of the same coin in Jesus' return. On the one hand, the celebration for the saints, and on the other hand, the destruction of the wicked. A dichotomy that is always at play when we're talking about the day of the Lord. The angel invites the birds to eat a very specific list, that you may eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of military tribunes, the flesh of the powerful, the flesh of horses and those seated on them, and the flesh of all people, both free and slave, and small and great. But I want to focus on the middle part because kings, military leaders, the powerful, the horses, and the ones that seated on them, all of this echoes an announcement in the book of Ezekiel. Once again, Ezekiel comes out as essential background reading for what we see happening in the book of Revelation. Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 17 through 21, which is the tail end of the Gog and Magog battle scenes, which cover a couple of chapters. And then there's this passage, and then immediately following this passage is where Ezekiel is told to watch an angel measure the eschatological temple that is in the future. So this passage is at a pivotal point between the Gog and Magog narratives and the measuring of the temple. In between there is this in Ezekiel 39, 17 through 21. And you, son of man, thus says the Lord Yahweh, say to all kinds of birds and animals of the field, be gathered, come be gathered from everywhere to my sacrifice that I am sacrificing for you, a great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. There's a lot of irony in that statement, that he's inviting the animals to come eat the sacrifice, because it's normally the animals that are the sacrifice. The animals are the ones being slaughtered and offered up, and then sometimes eaten. Many sacrifices would have the officiants and the ones offering the animal eat of the animal. This passage in Ezekiel flips that. And instead, Yahweh is inviting the animals to come eat. He says, you will eat flesh, you will drink blood, flesh of warriors you will eat, and the blood of leaders of the land you will drink. Rams, young rams and goats, bulls, and the fattened animals of Bashan, all of them. You will eat fat until you are satiated, and you will drink blood until you are drunk from my sacrifice that I sacrifice for you. And you will be satisfied at my table with horse and horseman and warriors and every man of war, declares the Lord Yahweh. And I will display my glory among the nations, and all of the nations will see my judgment that I have executed in my hand that I have laid upon them. This announcement that God is going to reverse the normal order of sacrifice and instead kill the people and let the animals eat serves as the background for this announcement of the angel. This angel only invites the birds. I don't have a satisfactory answer for why it would only be the birds in Revelation 19 and not the animals of the field. It's still a reversal where the birds get to be the ones eating and the ones who would normally be feasting are the ones going to be feasted upon. If we were reading all of Revelation straight through instead of taking it bit by bit as we were walking through it so slowly, this list would probably sound vaguely familiar with its list of kings, military tribunes, powerful people, and the free and the slave, because a very similar list was given in Revelation chapter 6, verse 15, with the sixth seal, the kings of the earth and the most important people and the military leaders and the rich and the powerful and every slave and free person hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. The word for military leaders there is a chiliarch. It means a captain of 1,000 people. We're more familiar with a centurion, which is a captain of 100. But if you take 10 centurions, you've got a chiliarch overseeing them, and made some hay out of this chiliarch being in the list back in chapter 6, as meaning that this is pointing to the specific Roman context, because we don't have chiliarchs in the American military or any modern military. That is a status and a title that was specifically Roman. I probably made too much of it back then, because here we have the same term being used again in a context that is clearly in the future, even to us. And so the chiliarch term is being used to identify a high-ranking military official, but I can't really say it's a Roman position per se in Revelation 19. It's feasible in Revelation 6, where I believe the context is in the first century, but not feasible in Revelation 19 if it applies, as I believe it does, to a future situation. We'll have to just take that chiliarch as a generic term for a high-ranking military leader, which the translators have done. Just as the word military tribunes is a chiliarch that has a specific meaning in the context of first century Rome that it doesn't have now, so the kings could be a archaic term for any leader of the nation. In the text, the Antichrist slash beast from the sea is the top dog, and he enlists the kings from the east to come with him against Jerusalem. Those don't necessarily have to be kings per se. They are the leaders of nations. It's talking about a rank in social strata, the slave being the lowest rank, the free person being of a slightly higher rank, the powerful, the rich being higher than that, the military leaders above civilians who are rich because the military leaders can exercise more power, and then the kings, the first in the list, and the ones who have the most power on earth. I believe the list in both Revelation 6:15 and 19:18 is meant to suggest all strata of social rank, the members of society from the top to the bottom. And this actually creates a bit of a conundrum, because if the birds are being invited to eat on the flesh of ordinary people and not merely the military and the kings that are leading them on this siege of Jerusalem, then it's a broader picture than just the people right there. Or maybe it's a possibility that ordinary people decided to follow the kings of the earth against Jerusalem, and that there are representatives of all of these strata of society mustered there outside of the gates of Jerusalem, besieging it, attacking it, making war upon it. That to me is a possibility that makes some sense of this invitation. So I'm still thinking about what could be the implications of this invitation to be broader than the military tribunes, the powerful. And maybe it's more to do with the way that Roman and ancient militaries did their battles, because I know that in a certain degree they enlisted people along the way. As they were marching to battle, they collected sometimes conscripted people to fight with them. We know about civilians being forced to carry a soldier's pack for a mile because of Jesus' teaching about doing it for 2 miles. But I think they also conscripted healthy young men into the battle and maybe forced slaves to do it as well. That could be a reference to paramilitary supporters who are there to feed and clothe and support in other ways the work of the army other than fighting as soldiers. And I do know that a Roman siege would be months or years. It was not something that would be over in a matter of days. It was a long engagement and it required supply lines. These people could be part of the supply lines made up of civilians and military, as well as those who are actually fighting on the front lines and performing the direct military action. I think there could be some context here that I am unfamiliar with that might explain it. Revelation 19:19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war with the one who is seated on the horse and with his army. I think maybe this verse is the deciding point. Jesus has now appeared on his white horse with his heavenly army. I think if I were standing along with the beast and his allies, and I saw Jesus in his radiant glory with a sword coming out of his mouth and angelic hosts on horses behind him, I would not fight him. I would either flee or switch sides. By continuing to oppose Jesus and his army, the beast and the kings of the earth have sealed their fate. They could repent from their decision to this point. At this point, it is irrevocable. Once they decide to continue to oppose Christ, even after they have seen him in his glory. And I believe that this is the continuation of the story of the beast and the kings of the earth gathering that started back in chapter 16 with the 6th bowl. I want to review where this moment starts and continue on, because this is not a separate battle. This is the same battle that starts when the beast decides to march against Jerusalem in Armageddon. That starts with the 6th bowl in Revelation chapter 16, verses 12 through 16. And the 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, in order that the way would be prepared for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. For they are the spirits of demons, performing signs that go out to the kings of the whole inhabited world, to gather them for the battle of the great day of God, the all-powerful. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who is on the alert and who keeps his clothing, so that he does not walk around naked and they see his shamefulness. And he gathered them to the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. As I explained back when we talked about Revelation 16, 12 through 16, and the 6th bowl, I don't believe Armageddon is the plain of Megiddo, because the first part of the word is talking about a mountain. And I believe that this Hebrew that's implied by the word Armageddon is actually a indirect reference to Jerusalem. That is the location where all of the prophets in the Old Testament say the battle of the great day of God the all-powerful is going to happen at Jerusalem. I believe that is where the beast is headed when he musters these kings to come with him and march across the Euphrates to Jerusalem. The Euphrates is some sort of boundary for this Babylon 2.0, and only when the Euphrates dries up does the beast make his move. I want to interrupt myself here and fill in the gap between the time when the beast marches across the Euphrates in chapter 16 and the time when Jesus appears and confronts him at Jerusalem in chapter 19. I believe we have a glimpse of what happens at Jerusalem in the meantime from the story of the two witnesses in chapter 11. There we read that the beast attacks Jerusalem and kills the two witnesses. He and his allies gloat over their bodies for 3.5 days until they are unexpectedly resurrected and called up to heaven. I believe this moment of the two witnesses being called to heaven happens just before we see Jesus arriving with his host in chapter 19. And we pick up the story from there. And then Revelation 19:19 happens. He is there, assembled to make war with the one who is seated on the horse and with his army. And then in verse 20, the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs before him, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who had worshipped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. It's quite the anticlimactic battle. There is no real battle. The beast is simply grabbed. It doesn't even say by whom. He's grabbed. Is it an angel that grabs him? Is it Jesus himself who grabs him and throws him? We don't even know. In a sense, it's not even important. In a way, this is reminiscent of what happens after Jesus is born and taken up to heaven in Revelation chapter 12. And immediately after that, Michael throws Satan out of heaven. Satan had been a threat and a powerful being in the heavens. After Jesus, Michael can throw him out and his angels. And here, whether it's Michael or Jesus or whomever, the beast is no threat. The beast is just grabbed, and the false prophet, and thrown into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. There's not even a fight. This is the first mention, by the way, of the lake of fire. It is not the first mention of fire and sulfur, but it is the first mention of it being a lake. The first place we read of fire and sulfur in a similar context is in Revelation 14, verses 9 through 11. I want to go there because it provides some context with this punishment. And another third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, and here is yet another angel speaking with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself also will drink of the wine of the anger of God that has been mixed full strength in the cup of his wrath, and will be tortured with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torture went up forever and ever, and those who worshiped the beast and his image did not have rest day and night, along with anyone who received the mark of his name. This particular angel is speaking of the torture of those who have been deceived, the followers who are worshiping the beast from the sea, who have allowed the false prophet to sway them and follow the beast and the dragon. And they are going to be tortured with fire and sulfur forever and ever. In Revelation 19, it is the actual beasts, the two beasts that are thrown into the fire. Now, all the rest will eventually go there, but they don't go there directly. In Revelation 19:21, we read what happens to all the rest besides the beast and the false prophet and the dragon, which gets a special note at the beginning of chapter 20. But in Revelation 19:21, the rest were killed by the sword of the one who is seated on the horse, the sword that comes out of his mouth. And all the birds gorged themselves on their flesh. So the army that is with the one on the horse doesn't really do anything. According to the narrative, someone, unstated who, grabs the beast and the false prophet, and then the one seated on the horse, who is Jesus, kills everybody else with the sword out of his mouth. What does that look like? I don't know how that actually plays out. I do think it is a literal death. And I think that's part of the point of the birds. The reason that the birds are included in this scene and finish the scene is the fact that this is a real death, and the birds are real birds, and they are really eating carrion, the flesh of the soldiers and others, those who were explicitly loyal to the beast, those who had taken the mark on their hand or forehead, who had gathered to fight against Jesus. And as a result, they are all killed by the sword in his mouth. I don't think that this represents every single nation on the earth. And the reason I think it does not is because of the existence of Gog and Magog after the millennium. There would not be any need to mention Gog or Magog after the millennium if every nation on earth had been accounted for in this action in chapter 19. Thank you again for joining me as we examine the treasures in Revelation 19 and see the ultimate demise of the beast from the sea and the earth. Next time we will look at the opening verses of chapter 20 and see what happens to the dragon, the unseen force behind the beast from the sea and the earth. Until we have an opportunity to meet again and examine the treasures in the biblical text, may the Lord be with you.